Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of my co-chair, Carmen Pombo, I'm delighted to welcome you to the Rule of Law Symposium this morning. First of all, congratulations on all of you surviving the demands of what is the conference week each and every year, and thank you for coming along on a Friday morning at the end of the conference and participating in our symposium. We are delighted to see you all and welcome you to what I hope will be an insightful and informative program today. I hope you'll be able to stay with us for the duration. We have 3 sessions today, 2 before lunch and then 1 after lunch, and we will be finishing by 3:30 so that you can enjoy at least some of the afternoon before the closing party tonight. To entice you to stay for the 3 sessions, I believe that we have a truly remarkable, distinguished and diverse range of speakers and panellists to present, discuss and share what in some instances may be disturbing perspectives, but they will certainly be moving and inspirational perspectives on our topic, which, as you know, is the persecution of lawyers and judges, threats to the rule of law and the independence of the legal profession. My name is Stephen Macliver, and I have the honour of being the co-chair of the Rule of Law Forum, as I say, with Carmen Pombo, my co-chair in the front here. I'm delighted to be joined by our other Rule of Law Forum officers, Stephen Denyer sitting at the back as Vice Chair, and Joe Weller sitting at the front also as an officer of the Rule of Law Forum, and I'm delighted to see that we're also joined by Helena Kennedy, who will be leading one of the 3rd session this afternoon. Helena needs no introduction, but is, as you know, the Director of the Human Rights Institute of the International Bar Association. Before I hand over to the chair of our first session, perhaps you'll permit me just to make a few introductory remarks. It is increasingly common today to speak of the crisis of democracy. And whilst we speak of it, regrettably, it is true. We are facing an ongoing assault on democracy's norms and values. Some commentators believe that we are facing, if not already in, a democratic recession. Earlier this week at Helena's excellent HRI showcase, we heard from Professor Stefan Lindberg from the University of Gothenburg in Sweden. And he described that we are experiencing and have been in for some time the 3rd wave of autocratization. You need only look at countries such as Hungary, Turkey and Venezuela, from whom we are going to hear a perspective this morning to realise that. And of course, we have been talking about for some time the rise of popularism. And if you define popularism to be, those who invoke the proclaimed will of the people to do so in order to stifle oppositions and to dismantle checks and balances which stand in their way, popularism is a threat to the rule of law. Even influential countries are experiencing the erosion of democracies. Mature democracies are becoming polarised, intolerant, and in some instances dysfunctional. Look no further than the United States. Under the presidency of Donald Trump, US democracy policy has reached its lowest ebb in 40 years. He appears indifferent, if not has a wanton disregard for democracy abroad. Professor Lindberg went on in his session earlier to say that it's a sobering thought that 1/3 of the world's population is living in declining democracy. Philippines, Poland, Myanmar, just to name a few. But what are the factors that he's identified that impacts on or are in decline? Freedom of expression is in decline. Freedom of association is in decline, and the quality of debate, particularly amongst political figures, is also in decline. But there's perhaps one more and equally relevant indicator as an early warning sign of declining or failing democracies, and that is judicial independence tends to be eroded before democracies decline. Rolling back democracies also rolls back the rule of law. With the with the reduction in rights, inevitably this increases autocracy. And across this region in which we are hosting our conference, in the broader Asian region, there is new legislation, existing laws, and government-aligned courts in some jurisdictions that are being used to punish critics, to silence the outspoken, and to attack the free and independent press. Cambodia, a democracy for 25 years, in 2018, achieved through elections a single state party by legislatively outlawing an opposition. Thailand has withheld elections. Vietnam's jails are full of activists and critics of the government. Laos has a very heavy-handed approach to the media and civil society. And China has our neighbour here, has a deteriorating human rights record, characteristic by a systematic approach to dismantling the concept of state accountability. It is pursuing a strategy of silencing human rights lawyers, groups, civil society, claiming that they threaten national security. So rather than states respecting the rule of law, they recast it as the rule by law, which seeks to legitimise the restoration of law and order at all costs. And those who stand up for their freedoms are targeted as committing an offence. I've already mentioned China, but we can go further afield to the human rights violations in Egypt. And of course, we are all well aware of the presidential-sanctioned extrajudicial killings in the Philippines. In 2 years, conservatively, 20,000 people have been killed by the government-directed war on drugs, including children. We are facing a systemic deterioration in the rule of law. Without independent lawyers, without an independent and fair judiciary, justice is not available to citizens. It also undermines the very foundation of societies. The independence of lawyers, which we will talk about in the first 2 sessions in particular this morning, is also being attacked in another insidious way. And that is the either misunderstood or deliberate association of lawyers with their clients. This is something that Helena has spoken about and intends to speak more so about over the coming months. And what do we mean by that? Because we represent our clients, those would seek to argue for mischievous purpose that we share their views, that we share their beliefs, that we are associated with their behaviours. Nothing could be further from the truth. It is clearly and fundamentally incorrect. It is a fundamental tenet of the rule of law that all those who are accused have rights, are entitled to representation and to the fair and due process of the law. And as we discussed very briefly in the IBA Council yesterday, this has escalated in a deeply and disturbing way. We only have to look at the very tragic circumstance of the Amsterdam lawyer last week who was assassinated. 44 years old with 2 children, just doing his job, representing a state witness in a major Dutch organised crime trial. He was murdered for that representation alone. So we live in troubled times in that respect. And in the first 2 sessions this morning, we have truly expert speakers and panellists at the front line of work in this area, and we will be examining these and other issues before lunch. After lunch, in our final session, which will be facilitated by Helena, what can we do about it? As lawyers, as bar associations, as civil society organisations, and as the IBA. As Christopher Leong, Law Asia President, who will be known to many of you, and former President of the Malaysian Bar Association, said in Sydney recently, and I quote, "Whilst there may be times when we are powerless to prevent injustice, there must never be a time when we fail to act or speak up against it." That brings hope, but for each and every one of us, it brings a personal challenge as lawyers, and that challenge is regardless of what we practice and where we practice. It now gives me considerable pleasure to introduce the chair of the first session of our Rule of Law Symposium this morning, Federica D'Alessandra. Federica, known to many of you, I'm sure, is the Executive Director of the Programme on International Peace and Security at the Oxford Institute for Ethics, Law and Armed Conflict. She is also the co-chair of the Human Rights Law Committee. Federica, you have the floor. Thank you.